For those of you who've been looking for Season 1 of Solarpunk Presents, but haven't been able to find it, here it is. Originally, it was published as part of Solarpunk Magazine's Solarpunk Futures podcast. We're reposting our episodes on our site to make them easier for you to listen to if you didn't catch them the first time. We hope you enjoy them. Also, don't forget to support us by spreading the word about Solarpunk Presents, writing us a review, or subscribing to our Patreon at patreon.com/solarpunkpresents. Hello and welcome to Solarpunk Presents, the companion podcast to Solarpunk Futures. Hosted by Solarpunk Magazine nonfiction editors extraordinaire Ariel, Kroon, and Christina de la Rocha. Ariel and I will be using this companion podcast to Solarpunk Futures to explore solarpunk goings-on in the world today. We'll be interviewing all sorts of interesting people who are doing work in the here and now that will help us get to a solarpunk future. And we'll be talking to each other about the visions of a sustainable, equitable future integral to solarpunk, and about issues we're curious about within the movement or genre, or whatever it is you want to call solarpunk. But one last thing before we jump into episode 2. For those of you, especially if you're outside of the United States, who are unfamiliar with the term BIPOC, it's an acronym that stands for Black and Indigenous People of Color. Okay, and now here's episode 2.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Solarpunk Presents. I'm very excited for today's episode where we're talking to John Okhiulu from the Decolonizing Wealth Project. John, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I'm really curious to hear more about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk and share and just, bounce ideas back and forth.
First, though, Jono, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Could you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a bit about how you got involved with the Decolonizing Wealth Project in the first place?
Happily, and also give some context on Decolonizing Wealth Project when I get to that stage of my intro. But yeah, to start, in essence, I'm a youngin from Oak Cliff, Dallas, Texas, by way of Nigeria. My dad's an immigrant from a small village in Nigeria called Ashan. This Ashan people. And then my mother was actually born and raised in the same community I was in Oak Cliff. And her people are descendants of enslaved Africans. Mostly, from what I know, my family on her side originated on this continent when we got here in Arkansas. So I'll have a lot of roots in that part of the country. But I'm currently stretching my roots out in Oakland, California, on unceded Muwekma lands. We're just working within community to reconnect with land and cultural traditions. And also recently graduated from Stanford University in the Bay. That's kind of how I got here.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Still coming down off that whole high moment in my life. But yeah, I got 2 degrees, one in African American studies, one in human biology. Sort of my concentration was focused on marginalized community health and holistic health, and thinking about the different ways systems kind of become embodied, and the different oppressive systems become embodied. And also did a lot of work with ancestry and intersectionality in the arts. So it's like I do a lot to try to kind of combine the sciences and the arts and the aesthetics and try to understand how they all impact how we thrive as humans. And so that was really a big part of my study. And then how I got to philanthropy. Well, originally I had an opportunity to work with the Emerson Collective, which was my first experience on the inside of philanthropy being this massive black box to me before that point. Like very little, I had very little understanding going in of like who made these decisions in this industry that's a $1 trillion industry. Trillions of dollars are sitting within this sector of our society. But didn't have it's just like, well, who knows kind of like what goes on the back end. So I got that first experience and I learned just like how these decisions are made and just like how much it matters to be in those rooms, like especially for communities that traditionally don't have access to this wealth, don't have access to this privilege and power that's kind of amalgamated within the sector. I wanted to take a second opportunity and take a second swing at taking on the the black box of philanthropy from a more engaged perspective, a more community connected perspective. And that's kind of what the Decolonizing Wealth Project has been for me in a lot of ways. I got a fellowship from Stanford to spend a year in philanthropy kind of on my own terms, like picking an organization of my choosing and finding out
Nice.
and just like setting up my own learning plan and figuring out my own goals. And so I took it to the Decolonizing Wealth Project. I actually learned about the project through watching a video of Edgar Villanueva, who's our principal and founder. He's from the Lumbee tribe, and he wrote this book called Decolonizing Wealth, Indigenous Wisdom to Heal Divides and Restore Balance. And this book has since become a movement. Edgar's like gone on to give many, many talks and many, many workshops teaching about this new framework in philanthropy called reparative philanthropy that he's kind of been a huge advocate for. And so I saw a video of him giving a speech on this. I was like, wow, that's really powerful. There are people within this sector changing the game and doing the work to really leverage resources for the sake of marginalized communities. And so upon getting the fellowship and upon getting into the process of finding a philanthropy workshop that I could work in, it turns out that the organizers of the fellowship were already connected to Edgar, and he had already reached out and asked that if he could connect to some of the fellows. And so I jumped at the chance. I was like, wow, you are actually my inspiration for applying for this fellowship and taking another swing at philanthropy. And it turns out that he had started a whole project called Decolonizing Wealth and Liberated Capital, and that there was a funding arm. So I was like, oh yes, would you by chance take on a fellow? We aligned on that, and since then it's been a really beautiful time, sort of working within many sectors in our society, like building campaigns to push back against some of the issues that we see in the world today, but specifically focusing on campaigns around reparations in America, around climate change action, around food and land justice, around youth empowerment. And it's really been a gift to bring my passions and perspectives to this work. And I'm very excited to continue to see where it goes. I'm staying on for a whole nother year as a program associate, continuing to build my roots here. Thank you again. I'm blessed and honored to be here and happy to talk more about it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That was so thorough. I mean, I was about to ask you, actually, my next question was, so what is the Decolonizing Wealth Project and where did it come from and what are its goals? But I think you've gone over a bit of that already. That's amazing. And I feel like I have a much better idea of what the Decolonizing Wealth Project is and its work also. And so, and I wanted to sort of pick up on how the Decolonizing Wealth Project is sort of positioning itself within the field of philanthropy.
Yes.
I checked out the website, and the Decolonizing Wealth Project website talks a lot about the narrative change and importance of transformation of the story around philanthropy and reparations, especially. And I was wondering if you could give us a little bit more insight on that and expand on that a little bit more.
Absolutely. I do a lot of work within our narrative change work. It's sort of one of our three verticals, you could call it. That we do narrative change, we do healing programs, and we do this redistributive grant making. That's our reparative giving aspect. But within our narrative change, I think it's important. It's kind of the basis and the foundation for our project is looking at the foundations of the stories we tell in the world, the narratives, the cultural dynamics that we live and exist in, the systems that we live and exist in, looking at the history and understanding that if we don't start on the same foundation and don't start on the same basis, we can't really get anywhere when we're talking about trying to heal from some of those past traumas and past and prevailing traumas in a lot of ways. So the Edgar really started with the idea of looking at the history of colonialism and how that colonialism and white supremacy kind of very much so are the foundation of our philanthropic industry. The reason why the wealth is amalgamated in the way that it is because generations ago, people decided that this was how they wanted to relate to people and relate to wealth. And so not only is our organization about telling that story and really trying to make sure that is understood, but also telling the story of how through different modalities. For example, Edgar really talks about his tribal perspective and the wisdom that comes from that around reciprocity and trying to relate to money as medicine. Money as medicine is a big framework that Edgar has been an advocate for, and sort of shifting the way we relate to literal wealth. Like, what if we could use wealth to build relationship and to heal each other and to heal ourselves at the same time, instead of thinking about it as like a mechanism for power exchange or a mechanism for exploitation and extraction. So using these frameworks, we're trying to tell new stories about how we can relate to each other in society and how our communities can find more sovereignty and find more ways to thrive. And so we, through engaging with media organizations, engaging with artists, and doing sort of like social media storytelling and like a lot of communications work. It's a lot of communications work to really, again, like tell these stories, both tell the past in the truthful way, and then tell about futures in more expansive and more community grounded ways.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That sounds amazing.
It's good work.
And it's really sort of putting the focus back on money as a tool to achieve these sustainable goals instead of just money in and of itself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Not money for money's sake, but money for something bigger, something brighter.
That just sounds so wonderful. I want that to be our world.
We do too. We're trying.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, why is it important within this context for the Decolonizing Wealth Project to be Indigenous and Black led within these communities?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. And I think especially contextually, given that we're really expanding our horizons to bring this conversation to a global stage, it's really important to understand the perspectives we come from as an organization. We don't represent the whole entire world, but we hope to be a part of a global community working to focus on sustainability and community sovereignty across different borders. So I'd say that the perspectives and backgrounds amongst our team reflect the vision that we have for the world, our vision for solidarity, especially among Black and Indigenous folks, the Black liberation movement and movements for tribal sovereignty. So at the end of the day, we always say it like this: the communities that are most affected and harmed by the generations of colonialism and racial capitalism are the experts in their own regard for how healing and their liberation can occur. And so given that, it's our goal to make sure that these platforms and these tables and these decisions are made by folks who come from the communities that hopefully the change is meant to take part in. And of course, something that we notice in philanthropy is that that's not necessarily commonplace. The decision-making tables, the grant-making rooms aren't necessarily reflective of the communities that they're meant to serve. And so we're trying to really bring about that change and help encourage different organizations across the board within philanthropy to make sure that these rooms are more reflective, and that through community advisory committees and community-based participatory grant making, more communities are able to make these decisions for themselves around how this wealth enters their communities or and transforms and changes their community.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Sort of empowerment. That's amazing. And
absolutely
something that's so necessary, I think, to these sorts of endeavors. And, you know, I think I have a pretty good idea at this point, but I do want to hear it from you as to, how do you think the Decolonizing Wealth Project specifically is Solarpunk?
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess I'd start with our vision. So I'm just going to read it.
Okay.
Because that's definitely, I think, where I see the Solarpunk start to weave itself into the fabric. So we say we envision a world where racial equity has become a societal norm, and new systems and ways of being ensure that everyone can live in their best lives, thrive in their cultures, and bring about healing from generations of colonial trauma. And so to me, that talks about us as the Decolonizing Wealth Project, trying to build a brighter future, a more reflective world. And we think really, really creatively about our pathways to get towards that future. And specifically, again, we're leveraging narrative, we're leveraging resources, we're leveraging traditional knowledge and wisdom to bring about that future. And so those are sort of our modalities. But to talk about a few ways that our work engages in the present to try to build out that solarpunk future, right? We have our Indigenous Earth Fund, which is a fund led and stewarded by Indigenous folks, in specifically within the context of the so-called United States of America, trying to build support and resource around Indigenous-led climate efforts. So we fund organizations that are working to, for example, fight against the or like build back a better sustainable system around salmon fishing in California and in the West Coast. We have organizations within our grantee partners who are working to use solar and wind on reservation territories to try to make those to make their energy uses and sources more green. And so a lot of the ways that we engage with this work is, again, we're looking at we're trying to do our best to find and build a relationship with the innovators, specifically again from the Indigenous communities who are working to build more sustainable communities and again, these are scientists, these are environmental policy advocates. Like our advisory committee is really, really reflective of the need for like multiple sectors of our society engaging in the same way, like sort of an interdisciplinary approach to thinking about sustainability, because you need the policy, you also need the traditional wisdom, you also need, again, the scientists and the academics. And so it's I think our Indigenous Earth Fund, for example, is a really beautiful portrayal of the ways that we can coalesce our different expertise together to sort of bring about these futures. And I'd also highlight our Food and Land Justice Fund in that space in general. We're in community with food justice organizers and local farmers and community farms working to transform our food systems within the United States and the way we use our land, and trying to bring about a more reciprocal, more healing and more resilient food system within the United States. And so I think that fund as well, that fund is a lot more reflective of the Black American experience, like communities that are traditionally descended from enslaved Africans and have lost that relationship to land, but maintained that sort of underlying tradition and that underlying knowledge around how to engage with the land, coming back to it in sort of, the narrative arc of that. And so I can talk a lot more about that fund, but our futures are definitely like trying to build that solarpunk idea around resilience and around like reflective communities and like where all of our cultures can thrive, and we're really being critical about the ways that our society looks today and hoping to push back against those colonial practices that have brought about conditions where it's really hard to imagine those futures. And again, of course, we do our best to tell those narratives. And so our narrative, I think like a lot of the ways that we communicate are the stories of our grantee partners, helping give people time, space, resources to envision those futures, especially those, again, who are often left out of common narratives when we look at Hollywood and things like that. That's a big part of the work too. And so that's, I think we approach it from multiple angles, and we don't necessarily like, again, identify on our website or anything like that, I guess Solarpunk, but if you really look at a lot of the ways that our programs engage in the world, I can definitely see the relationship.
Yeah, for sure. It's very, very like solarpunk adjacent. At the very least, I think you're sort of laying the groundwork for the solarpunk futures that we all want to see.
Right, and making sure more resources are available for some of these solarpunk projects to really thrive. Yeah,
for sure. Now I'm joining you from Canada today, or so-called Canada, and I was wondering if I wanted to get involved in something like the Decolonizing Wealth Project, but I don't live in the United States of America. And I was going to ask you if the DWP is America only, or is it doing work in other countries? And do you know if there are other projects like it around the world? You talked a little bit about travel equity, I think. And I'm just sort of curious as to what's going on with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we do have a member of our team, Vanessa Thomas, who leads our global programs. We are sort of a global organization, and it matters because colonialism was a global system.
Oh yeah.
And the biggest empire that ever existed was the UK. At one point, I think 3/5 of the world, they say, was under colonial rule of the United Kingdom.
Whoa, omniscient producer Christina here, breaking in to say that John asked us to correct this. It was not 3/5, but 1/3 of the world that was under British colonial rule, which is still an amazing number of people. And now, back to the conversation.
And so Vanessa Thomas is actually from London, and so she does a lot of work, and she's helping us to really broaden our horizons and how we have this conversation, right? Edgar, coming from this side of the world, had this perspective around philanthropy and its colonial roots, but was really tapped into a global community through engagement with other organizers and facilitators that come from different perspectives, come from outside the so-called United States, and tapped into the understanding of just like we said, the global dynamics of this work, the global dynamics of the colonial story, and the different ways that we can, as communities across the world, build solidarity to try to break down some of these harmful systems. And so what we have done so far to sort of engage in that way is we have and are continuing to build out workshops, specifically our Decolonizing Wealth workshop, in the UK. So we're working with leaders in that space to really think about how to tailor and translate some of these narratives to expand its horizon and resonate with broader community across the world. I think this narrative is important to think about in so-called United States, but also the Caribbean, also South America, and also the African continent. Like again, looking at the different pieces of the empire and how they have engaged with this system. And so we're also just working to build out collectives of people who can think and can be thought leaders and provoke more conversation around again this framework around reparative giving, again looking at and reparation, looking at the roots of our wealth in broadly globally, and looking at the ways that we relate, especially in the field of global aid, where again, like I think there's a lot there when we talk about global aid around who's making decisions in that space and like what are they for. We can think about capitalism and sort of leveraging philanthropy to sort of to perpetuate a lot of the harm in our society.
Right.
This is an immensely like interconnected conversation, and so we're definitely doing work to try to build out just like solidarity movements, just build out community and coalition to like have these conversations and to really weave this web of support for change within this space. And I'd say lastly, we are hoping to like talk about our global programs more on our website. So for folks that want to tap in further, who might not be from the United States, you can definitely check us out on social media and engage, because it matters so much that we're not just having this conversation in a silo, but that we're growing and expanding and learning along the way with anybody who again feels resonant and feels connected to this narrative. So you can follow us on social media. You can check out our website. We're going to build out a global programs homepage that can hopefully be a place where we can like lay that strategy out in a clear picture. And as we continue to build and learn more, I'm sure there'll be a lot more opportunities to engage in that way. Yeah.
Wow, I'm looking forward to checking that out. That sounds so like invigorating and exciting. I'm going to go to the website and check that out and follow you guys on social media.
For sure, yeah. It definitely takes all of us. It definitely takes all of us to make this happen. So
yeah, totally.
Everyone's invited.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the term philanthrocapitalism, because I was wondering how the Decolonizing Wealth Project interacts with capitalist hegemony, specifically in the so-called United States. but also industrialized nations more broadly. And I have my own thoughts on this, but I would like to hear yours. I'm not really an expert in economics at all. I know some of our listeners are very attuned to the benefits and drawbacks of various economic systems. And this is something that folks at your organization probably think about quite a lot. And so I'm wondering, is the Decolonizing Wealth Project sort of working just within capitalism, or looking to introduce a whole new economic model, or augmenting what already exists? I'm curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely share sort of like from an organizational perspective how we engage with the hegemony
Please
that
do.
we see as very much so like a disruption of the balance that's supposed to exist on Earth. Definitely our ethos is rooted in the concept that colonialism has disrupted that balance, and that's our definitely bread and butter focus is disrupting colonialism as a structure that we believe has harmed us all. Colonialism, white supremacy, and these systems and structures that follow remain with us, and they the impacts of the exploitation, and again the ways that power has been differentially allocated across our society, power being wealth and resource, power being ability to create the world around us, ability to farm, access to land. These things have been amalgamated in a very inequitable way, and that's where we're trying to intervene. We look at the racial wealth gap as a metric for how far we have to go to really make sure that, again, this equity is realized and this balance is restored. And so we operate through again, the framework, the 7 steps to healing, as defined by our founder, Edgar, which leaves a lot of room for reflection, apology, and action, more specifically, as a way to bring about that healing and bring about that change. And so that includes the idea of reparations, which is, again, working within this framework of capitalism, working within the society we have. How do we leverage the resources that currently exist, and to bring about that healing and bring about that change, and bring that power back to communities whose backs this country was built upon. So we look at reparations, we look at land back. This is very much so existing within the frameworks that we live in. We're bringing people to the table who very much so operate within capitalist logics. We bring founders to the table, entrepreneurs to the table. We look at your wealth, and we try to help facilitate that process of return, facilitate that process of reparation, facilitate that process of healing. And so we definitely operate within that bridge connecting role in this way. We philanthropy is very much a part of this economic system, and so we look at what the tools that we have within this are within our proximity to be able to bring about this return, right? And we also leave a lot of space for community to decide for themselves, again, on what liberation means for them. And so I think that just like the tradition of Solarpunk, where we have to lay out so many different avenues to our futures and sort of over time kind of align them to get to the same point. That's what we believe in as well. We try our best not to define liberation for others, and we do our best not to define like what's the best economic system, for example, that will help us get there the fastest. I think that can be left up to the researchers and the academics and everyone else who has that perspective. And again, most importantly, to the communities who are existing within the systems that they want to change. And so I think that's the position we hold, and we hold it with all the nuance and with all the with all the sort of narrative nuance that exists within it. And it's very much so a challenging position to hold, and it's a very much so I think what we're best equipped to take on.
I mean, doing what you can within the system that exists, always looking towards a better tomorrow is very Solarpunk, I think.
I think so too.
I was wondering, actually, where do you see the Decolonizing Wealth see the Decolonizing Wealth Project being, and what do you see it doing sort of in the next few years? Like, what's coming down the pipe?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely highlight again our global programs, our work to decolonize global aid. that work is very much so flowering. We've planted the seeds. We've starting to build relationships with people from various perspectives and various aspects of the world. We have a team that's very reflective of the global dynamic of this work, and so we're trying our best to sort of build up roots in different places and hopefully start doing more workshops and more programs in different countries, and really trying to connect that network. So that's definitely on the horizon, is just more engagement broadly and globally, and I think that does so well to help our language coalesce and become more powerful and more accessible for folks from different perspectives. And I'm really excited to see where that goes. We're also continuing our core work to resource Black and Indigenous and other communities of color as they build their sovereign, sustainable futures and communities. And so that means working to enter more funders' rooms, to coalesce more resource, to build more bridges. I'd highlight our donor community, which is our Liberated Capital community. It's a community of folks from across the sort of spectrum of class who are donating funds and sort of joining this giving circle community is how we frame it. It's the idea that you sit in a circle, basically, like metaphorically, you're sitting in a circle with folks in sharing a shared vision for how you want to see the world and putting your resources behind it. And so we have a donor community that's around 400 now, and it's ever expanding. And that's a large way that we resource the funds that I've been talking about: our Food and Land Justice Fund, our Indigenous Earth Fund, our Case for Reparations Fund. I think deepening our initiatives in those ways to support reparations, climate, and food and land justice efforts is always something that's on our mind and heart. And so we're just looking for more people to resource that work, more people to engage in making sure that these grants can be long-term, that these organizations can be more sustainable. Again, so we're trying to build a tradition. We're trying to work within this movement to build a tradition of resourcing and supporting Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color. And we're definitely engaging further in content creation. Like we said, our narrative arm is ever expanding, and we're recruiting actively to have a bigger team that can support engaging with new technologies and new platforms to share our message. Me and one of my colleagues talk all the time about the metaverse and VR and how these technologies can be used to share these narratives. There's Indigenous futurists and Afrofuturist creators out there that we really hope to engage with in the future, to offer spaces for healing, offer spaces for storytelling around our heritages, our traditions, and again, telling these futures from the perspectives that are often left out of the conversation. And so we're definitely building forward in that tradition in that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Imaginative expansion and capacity expansion and sustainability in more than just one definition of the term.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now,
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say sustainability within the nonprofit or the non-governmental organization sector is such an important aspect of why I think philanthropy is so important and valuable within our society, is that a lot of times organizers do this work for free. They do community gardens because they really feel passionate behind it. But we know that today, you need resources to survive. And so I'm trying to make sure that a lot of folks within our grantee partners can pay their workers, can pay their organizers to do this work, to that's oftentimes underlooked and undervalued, but it's so important to again, how we get to this place where our futures are reflective of all of us. So we definitely, through our youth engagement work, through our internships and things like that, we're trying to build up a tradition where this work is sustainable, and this work is sustainable in the resource way, as well as again the societal sustainability.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I know with a lot of organizing work, especially, all of the unpaid organizing work, it's very easy for people to burn out, if there's not that sustainable sort of option there and the different methods of support.
Right.
it's very easy to burn out.
Yeah.
And a lot of these organizers are doing extremely important work. And it's just so sad that so many people are just turned off of organizing because of the fallout. So it's really great that the Decolonizing Wealth Project is sort of paying attention to the way that that is an issue within the community.
Yeah, and it's we've experienced it. We like I think a lot of us in our organization come from organizing traditions and have experienced burnout, and so we recognize the importance and value of providing that like emotional assistance and healing support, and making sure that we are at our best when we're serving communities, such that again, like we can start to push back against that tradition of burnout, that tradition of running into walls with this work. Yeah, that's a huge part of what we do.
Right. When you're passionate about something, it's easy for the flame to burn very hot, but maybe not burn for very long. And
exactly.
So finding ways to keep it burning is very important. So yeah. And I was going to ask you, John, I know it might be difficult because the Decolonizing Wealth Project has so many different things that it's doing right now, but what is your favorite project that you've been involved in with the Decolonizing Wealth Project so far?
Okay, definitely a tough question. I'm a Libra, and so it's hard for me to pick favorites all the time. I always try to play that sort of balance. It all matters. It's all important, and it is true. I think it's all matters and it's all important. But I do have a favorite in this regard, because our Food and Land Justice Fund in particular connects very much so to my heritage and in my own family's story of reconnecting with the land and reconnecting with regenerative land-based traditions. And so I can talk more about this fund. It's a partnership with Shirley Sherrod at New Communities and Conda Mason at Jubilee Justice, and our fund Liberated Capital, and it's supporting BIPOC farmers and food justice advocates across the United States. And so I said it intertwines deeply with my family's story of returning to the land as slave descended folks and immigrant African folks. My dad comes from a farming family in his tribal community back in Nigeria, and again, my just 2 generations ago, my mother's family was farming on over 100 acres in Arkansas before, again, through different processes of land loss and heiress property, they lost relationship to that, and we're now coming back to it. And this story connects more generally to this space where there's this narrative of powerful farmers and community builders fighting against land loss, Black land loss, to win food and agricultural justice for BIPOC farmers, right alongside Indigenous stewards from this land, working to restore the relationship to their own foodways and to the land that they've been stewarding for generations. It's central to our vision for racial and economic justice as an organization. And the stories and narratives within this work are just amazing and outstanding. Like every time I hear from another grantee partner around the ways that they're connecting folks to farmers markets and they're teaching young kids how to stick their hands in the soil and get their hands dirty, and learn about, and like as soon as you see a seed sprout up for the first time and you see a little like first green leaf pop out, I think your life is totally transformed. And so people are really connecting communities that have lost this relationship through like what we often refer to in the field as food apartheid, which is just like a direct systematic like stripping away of folks from relationship to land and relationship to food. There's so many people doing so much good work to transform that relationship, and it's definitely been the most awe-inspiring, definitely the most I feel the most connected to, and work that I'm excited to see grow. I'm excited to see these networks build and like see more farmers sharing their expertise with each other and sharing their best technological practices with each other, starting to see more of these farms become more sustainable, get access to more technology. We're helping people like get tractors for the first time so they don't have to rent equipment, so they can really really like build up a food tradition that's again sustainable for their communities. It's just like the little things that add up within this field that I think are really, really cool. So definitely my favorite project. So cool. Yeah, definitely my favorite project.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
You seem so very passionate about this, and it just sounds so cool and so amazing to be part of.
Absolutely.
And I guess now it is time for me to ask you the most important question. But with all of that in mind, what does your personal Solarpunk future look like?
Yeah, that's my favorite question. Thank you for asking. Yeah, and I think in my Solarpunk future, we've done away with a lot of the sort of exploitative racial capitalist logics that kind of govern our decision makings today, and instead we govern our decision making on more holistic, equitable, and innovative values. I think about ideas around reciprocity, aligning the world with our built world with our natural cycles and natural systems that we are all a part of, whether we know it or not. I think about resiliency, so like doing away with wasteful overconsumption. Like we have like, these are things we have to do, I think, in the next few years. And so as we start to see more climate catastrophe, while we're doing this work, we need to be able to make sure that our communities can sustain inclement weather and sustain themselves for seasons of drought. I think we have a lot of technology available to make sure that this happens, if only our incentives can change. And so my goal, coming from an inner city, coming from a community that doesn't have access to clean water, whose air is polluted by factories, I really want to see in my future cityscapes that are designed with these values in mind that I mentioned, where we have abundant green space and an understanding of local native plants. I think everybody should be taught how to identify, understand, and care for their immediate natural environment if they so choose. But just like that connection to like the plant people, the animal people around us, and a deeper understanding of that is definitely like one of my goals and the things I hope to educate around in my community. I think about clean energy transport, like walkable cities. It's just like I want to see a total transformation of our cityscapes. I think like that where so much of our world is amalgamated in urban centers. I think there's so much that we can do just there with the technology we have to transform towards a more sustainable version of our society. And I also see cultural vibrancy. As an African American, I want to see an assuredness amongst my people that of who we are, who we come from, how we live and embody light, like literally. So that cultural groundedness is definitely a part of my Solarpunk future. Like the idea that our cultures are here and they matter and they're important and we can express them in all these expansive ways. And so as an Afrofuturist, I love to see, and a nerd, I love to see more and more Black sci-fi and things like that as a way to sort of get us there. But yeah, that's definitely where I'd go about like talk about my Solarpunk future.
Awesome. Wow, I want to live there.
Yeah.
I want to live there.
I do too. In the meantime, we'll just keep writing about it and really feel it tangibly through our stories. Yeah.
In the meantime, keep doing the good work with the Decolonizing Wealth Project, because it sounds like we're working towards that future, definitely.
Yeah, we are, and I shall.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. And I was wondering, you mentioned social media earlier. If we could take a moment so you can tell our audience where to find out more about the Decolonizing Wealth Project.
Absolutely.
If they want to go.
Yeah. So if you want to check us out, definitely check us out on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Decolonizing Wealth or at Decolonize Wealth. We're also starting up a TikTok tradition. I think like video storytelling is always something that takes a lot of energy and production, but can be a really effective method of outreach. So you can follow us there. Also at Decolonize Wealth. You can check us out on our website at decolonizingwealth.com. We have a donor community that you can connect to engage further and check out our healing summits and other public facing work that we take part in and partner with. I'd say those are the best ways to connect with us and our work.
Awesome, thank you. And how about yourself? I mean, if you feel comfortable, do you have any socials that you would like to let our listeners know about, where they can follow you, see what you're up to?
Sure. Yeah. So I've personal Instagram and Twitter, I'd say, is the best way to connect with me. I do poetry, and I'm hoping to like continue to start writing and sharing solarpunk narratives and things like that too. So
Nice.
both of those are at Soul Liberationary. That's like SOUL Soul IBERT liberation, excuse me, LIBERATIONARY. So Soul Liberationary on Instagram or Twitter.
We'll link it all down in the description.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
Don't worry about it.
Spelling on the spot. I'll tell you what, that is
sorry to make you do that.
Yeah, but definitely check me out there. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Well, thank you again so much. This has been such an amazing and generative conversation. And I feel like I personally have learned so much. And I am so excited to see what Decolonizing Wealth Project does in the future and how it expands.
I really appreciate the opportunity to share our work, Ariel, and share a little bit about myself. Thank you so much. You've been a great interviewer. I really appreciated this conversation. Hope we get to connect soon more. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that was episode number 2. Thank you for listening to Solarpunk Presents, a series embedded within the Solarpunk Futures podcast, written, hosted, and produced by Christina de la Rocha and Ariel Kroon. This podcast is a part of Solarpunk Magazine, which is published by Android Press, which is located on Kalapuya Ilihi, the traditional indigenous homeland of the Kalapuya people. Today, descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon. The opening and closing music for Solarpunk Presents is Water Cooler Gang by Monkey Warhol and is available for use under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License. So, thank you again for listening, and until the next episode, stay Solarpunk.